Okay, today we're finding out why Goji Center thinks InGen didn't kill the D-Rex. In the movie, they say it's because everything's like a very expensive asset, so why would they want to kill them?
Why not just euthanize them?
The average cost of a created species is $72 million.
But then logically, why would they release them on an island where they could all kill each other if they're very expensive assets? Actually, that makes no sense to me now that I think about it. So let's see what the hell Goji Center's got to say on the subject.
D-Rex has now made its
Can't hear it.
official
Can't hear shit around here.
D-Rex has now made its official debut on the big screen.
Dude, that looks just like that weird abomination xenomorph child of like Ripley's in that one movie that gets sucked through the hole in the freaking spaceship. That's the exact face. That's so horrifying, bro.
Giving us the chills and thrills we were expecting. But most people, especially those who avidly follow Jurassic, were left with more questions rather than answers. So today on Goji Center, we'll delve deep into the known anatomy of the Distortus Rex while taking into account its history that could possibly lay bare some of its hidden secrets, including why InGen decided to let this mutant roam about instead of terminating it. Today on the analysis platform, we'll begin by displaying a completely accurate model of the Distorted King. Soon, we'll get into the anatomy and find out a few interesting details that sets this creature apart from the rest. Before that, we'll give you a quick rundown of everything we know about the history of this creature.
Details that set that creature apart from the rest is kind of funny, because it's so obviously like the most abominable creature ever summed up by this franchise.
The opening text for Jurassic World Rebirth explicitly implies that Distortus Rex, along with its other mutated kin, were
Mother of
created
God.
more than 17 years ago. More than, because this D-Rex had evidently been wandering about for some time already, given its size at this point in the early 2010s.
Hold the phone. Look at that little... Any of these could be the D-Rex. I thought the first one was the D-Rex because it was like a little bulbous, but the second one obviously looks like with the... They're just the littlest disgusting abominations I've ever seen in a little bacta tank.
Oh,
My
more
God.
than, because this D-Rex had evidently been wandering about for some time already, given its size at this point in the early 2010s. A reminder that all InGen creatures, both big and small, were all genetically modified organisms, and therefore their growth rates were all enhanced. D-Rex wasn't going to spend 8 to 10 years growing to adult proportions. On the contrary, D-Rex could have possibly been created as early as 2007 or 2008. The place of its creation also gives us insight as to exactly what they might have been trying to do here. St. Hubert, the island who was also recently slapped with the label of Site C, was another InGen facility where even more wild experiments took place.
Hubert.
In a place where two-headed, further mutated mutodons were brought forth, two-headed triceratops, alien-looking embryos, it's clear that some of these creatures did not come out as intended.
Look at those
The fact
things.
that we do see other mutated creatures, or what evidently seems to be InGen's first stab at hybrid territory, makes us think that this place was actually purposely instigating mutations in their creatures. A mutation, by definition, is a change in the DNA sequence or chromosomes of a living organism. The meddling with what are known as Hox genes in a creature could result in things like what we saw in the movie: extra limbs or heads in animals, distorted proportions, dysfunctional internal anatomies.
What the hell?
We saw it all in this lab. Distortus Rex, although obviously mutated, might have wound out that way purposefully to some extent. The InGen geneticists maybe did not intend for D-Rex to look like this, since really this doesn't really look like the most marketable creature to sell tickets. And funnily enough, both in universe and in real life, a whole lot of people showed their disapproval of this animal. So you can imagine the marketing flop this mutant would have made once the public got a whiff of Jurassic's next big attraction.
Bro, they would have been heavily protested. Once you start whipping out abominations to the public? Yeah,
We
no
say
way.
next, because at this point in the Jurassic timeline, Masrani was already planning the next big attraction for Jurassic World.
I think about this scene a lot, actually. Now that it's on camera, we can discuss it for a second. Claire had no need to spin that DNA strand. It was purely for Flash, but it didn't even spin that far, so the Flash didn't even go that far. Look at this. Look at this.
Point in the Jurassic timeline,
What was the point of that? Nothing. Nothing.
Masrani was already planning the next big attraction for Jurassic World. Rexy, being a T-Rex, was already going to sell tickets, but as they say in business, adapt or die. The audience was eventually going to get tired of the same attractions and would eventually want to see something new. And these guys knew this. Now, it was quite possible that Simon Masrani was unaware of everything that they were doing in Site C, proven by the fact he didn't even know what the Indominus Rex was made of or was capable of. A lot happened under his radar, and these mutants were very likely some of those things. D-Rex, upon hatching or while growing up, was given the name Distortus Rex. You don't give that name to something that isn't malformed, so clearly this animal had a few things wrong with him. So, why keep him alive and let him grow to such size?
That is the question, isn't it?
Here's where things get a little interesting. Recall in the movie how this doorway had a digital label reading D-Rex V23, very likely short for version 23. While not explicitly mentioned in the film, we can't ignore what this implies. This Distortus Rex may not have been given this name upon birth, but instead this was a name given to a very early line of predecessors, further implying that InGen had previously made different attempts at purposefully modifying the T-Rex genome to something different.
God, if that's the perfect version, can you imagine how horrifying? Just absolute sludge monsters that are just screaming, "Kill me!" Like, that's what I'm picturing.
So if we entertain the idea that there were indeed 22 other prior D-Rex iterations, where are they? Well, the answer to that may well explain why they didn't kill, or rather terminate, this one. In the film, Dr. Loomis threw around the question as to why they didn't put down the mutated creatures.
I totally forgot that guy's name.
The obvious answer to this was that they didn't have to. They probably all died already. The previous 22 mutants' anatomy was so faulty that they may have all died upon birth, or as infants. This is further supported by the fact that we did see the bodies of young two-headed Triceratops and Brachiosaurus in tanks, possibly deceased creatures who didn't make it past infancy. Could this smaller embryo also have been another D-Rex who died earlier? It's hard to tell at this point, but everything so far hints that this D-Rex was the 23rd version, and this one was the only one who managed to stay alive. The InGen crew likely wanted to keep this one alive, despite it being still mutated and non-marketable, to study it, so as to not make the same mistakes again. But later on, we saw they made completely new ones. Let's take a look at the D-Rex as it appeared in the film and see if we can't find out what else is going on under the hood.
You know, this whole franchise confuses me now. Once I had that thought at the beginning of the video regarding if they want to keep these dinosaurs alive, why would they just release them all in an island where they could kill each other? It doesn't make sense. Like, I don't know. It's nonsense.
The Distortus Rex has easily the most distinctive body of any theropod in the franchise. We still aren't sure of what went into its genome, but the name and some of the features of its body do imply that the base at least was a Tyrannosaurus. This specifically makes sense if it was supposed to be the replacement for Rexy eventually. It's possible that other major contributors are present, with the arms looking suspiciously primate-like, and something else in the DNA mix was also likely present to bump up the weight. Looking like somebody threw a xenomorph and a rancor into a mixer, this six-limbed body is malformed, but as we saw in the film, it was functional. This extra set of limbs was probably the result of InGen messing with the Hox genes. For those non-biologists in the audience, these are essentially the hard coding of a body. They tell the rest of the DNA how to build the basic layout of an organism. You can make edits within the Hox genes to change the shape and configuration of a limb in a lab, but changing the entire Hox gene sequences is extremely difficult to happen naturally. This is why all land vertebrates don't have more than 4 limbs, or at least shouldn't. What happened with D-Rex was probably either an error or maybe an experimental edit done purposely. Obviously, with this method, it's extremely unlikely that you're gonna get the desired results the first time, hence explaining the previous 22 versions. But InGen happened to make this one functional enough to keep alive. These limbs allowed this animal to grab objects and bring them close to his mouth, tipped with claws for shredding and rending, but the most interesting addition to these hands was the pollex, the anatomical term for the thumb. That's right, folks, and we start entering shady territory for this one.
See, what I'm thinking now, military contracting is like the most profiting thing on the planet. Basically, I'm thinking, what if they were just like contracted to make some sort of all-terrain T-Rex, something more like a quadruped, but big enough and like strong enough to just go in and kill everything? Honestly, weapons contracting would be a huge part of it.
Both D-Rex and Indominus share at least 2 things in common: base genome of T-Rex and opposable thumbs. The latter having absolutely nothing to do with the base contributor. The presence of the said pollex may have explained how InGen managed to give the Indominus the opposable thumb as well. This may be yet another reason why they kept this one alive. They might have failed at making a creature that would be sponsored by Verizon Wireless, but this version may have had a few things done correctly. This thumb would be present in all 3 subsequent hybrids seen in the franchise: Scorpius, Indominus, and the Indoraptor. But it happened on St. Hubert Island first. The arms and hands may have been
That's actually
one of the
crazy
very
to
few
notice.
things keeping this thing alive on this island, both because it helped this big animal move around and pick up its food, and perhaps InGen seeing this hand mutation being the only thing salvageable out of version 23.
Damn.
However, there were arguably more faults than virtues in D-Rex. One was probably the head. One error that gave it its trademark appearance was its noggin, seemingly a case of hydrocephaly in the skull. This is a result of when fluid has built up inside of the skull as it formed. The result is a bulbous, soft top of the head resembling that of an embryo.
So gross,
This soft,
dude.
squishy melon is fortunately held really high away from any shorter, lesser theropods that could sink their teeth in. Had the D-Rex been shorter, this guy wouldn't have survived its first theropod matchup.
So basically, if that thing came at you, you want to shoot it in that big bulbous head ball of liquids? That's disgusting. What, would it just start freaking springing leaks and then die? Is that...
But being extraordinarily
happen?
large came with some negative side effects. Note how this creature has a distinctive hunched back and a very thick, or lack of, a neck. Likely another deformity from Hawk's editing. This awkward skeletal anatomy means that some of the theories we presented prior to the release of the film were indeed true. This animal wasn't the fastest, and definitely not a pursuit predator. As it grew to larger proportions, it would have been encumbered by its increasing weight, making hunting lighter animals more difficult, forcing the Distortus to adapt and alter its hunting methodology. One thing you may have noticed in the film was that you never really got to see Distortus Rex in plain sunlight, but rather at nighttime. Being so large and slow would have forced D-Rex to think and determine that the best way to acquire its next big meal was to go the stealthy route, using the cover of darkness and being relatively silent when it wants to when lurking around in the dark. This may have been the only way this D-Rex would have actually been able to hunt down and kill anything of note. This creature may have relied on the element of surprise and ambushed any large herbivores, with a quick short lunge and leveraging those long arms and hands to bring an unsuspecting victim closer to the business end, its jaws. Now, based on this anatomy, that being with longer arms and a short neck, we'd like to think that almost every case where D-Rex is fighting or hunting, the hands are deployed first.
Man, why couldn't we get a scene like that? How difficult would it have been to have a scene where it hunts a dinosaur and eats? Like, it would have been so sweet. It goes back to like packs of raptors. Whenever you see a pack of raptors take down a dinosaur for food, they just always leave out so many crucial, awesome potential scenes.
And that is precisely how we saw 2 people get eaten by D-Rex. This bite was backed up by jaws that could crunch through a helicopter. We're going to ignore the fact that this animal miraculously grew to 25 meters in height to achieve this, but the bite itself says a lot about what this creature is capable of. We've all seen the older documentaries of a mechanical T-Rex biting into cars.
I have
While
not.
A scaled-up T-Rex could maybe do the same to a helicopter, the fact that this is still a malformed skull can't be ignored. Its warped jaw proportions would indicate that this bite force shouldn't be as good as a T-Rex on paper.
See, I kind of imagined it was like a missing chromosome type of thing. Like, we have limitations set in our body to know how hard to apply ourselves before we damage ourselves, where something like this, just a Frankenstein version of a man, like an 8-foot-tall abomination human, would just bite till his jaw breaks or something, you know what I mean?
But sheer size gives it plenty of power. As long as
Or
the
that,
herbivorous
yeah, that makes
population
more
of
sense.
Isle St. Hubert keeps breeding, we're expecting D-Rex to stay alive for quite some time. Perhaps making a reappearance in the next outing. Perhaps long enough to live the best life it possibly can. Or perish in an epic battle against another formidable foe.
That was deep. Got me thinking. I think the biggest takeaway from this video, aside from all the important points that were made, was that double-headed Triceratops. It would be the biggest, worst abomination ever, but just as a huge Triceratops fan, I'd like to see it. I'd like to, although I don't know how it would even live. Like, 2-headed animals usually die. It's a complex subject that I know very little about. Either way, though, I do get it. I understand keeping assets alive because they cost a lot of money to make and you could learn more from them. But now I sort of don't understand why they then release them all onto an island where they kill each other in an effort to keep them safe and alive. It almost seems kind of contradictory at that point. So let me know what you guys think down below. But either way, leave a like, subscribe to Goji Center, and I'll see you next time.